Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from December 15th, 2023, and I'm recording this on June 13th, 2024. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is relevant because the market is always moving and changing, as we will see when we look at the price differences of just 6 months on some of these books. So, as always, also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week they put out a list of 10 books that are moving, trending in the market, that people are chasing, that are jumping in value. And we look back 6 months later to see how they're performing now. Should you have been patient? What factors made you need to be patient or made you need to go after the book in the moment? And see if we can learn and all make a little better decisions about what books we chase and what books we're patient on when those hot books, and it's like when the FOMO sets in, what should we do? So, without further ado, we got 17 books to talk about, so let's dig into this list and see what we can learn. We got a lot of books this week that are actually longer history, a little better trend than most weeks, so we'll see how that actually causes them to perform. First up, we got Godzilla, #1 from 1977, the first U.S. comic series for Godzilla, and obviously this was right in the middle of the Monster series, the Monarch series, as well as Godzilla -1, and Godzilla was super hot back in December. 9.8s were going for $450 to $550. Now they're still going for $400 to $500. Raw copies are $20 to $100. Call this one steady and I'll be back. You could argue maybe slightly down and I'll be back, but still very much in the same range of where it was at 6 months ago, if maybe a very slight step back on Godzilla #1. Next, we're going to move into Monster in My Pocket #1 on the list for the second week in a row. Last week when we talked about it, it was a $15 to $20 book by its second week on the list after being announced that they were going to make a live action series out of this. Or movie, I forget. Anyway, by the second week, it was up to a $20 to $40 book. Now it's back to a $10 to $20 book. So yeah, this is a trap. If you got in on that first week you were about right at that 15 to 20, but now by the time it was 20 to 40, definitely a trap on this one. Has not sustained nearly those prices. Next, we have another book related to a show, and this is Butterfly #1. This has hit the list a couple different times over the last couple of years. At this point, it was because there was casting being announced from the Amazon show. It was still back then just an $8 book. 9.8, though, did hit $125. Now, only 3 total sales in the last 3 months, but they are 10 to 25 on those sales. So they are definitely up from that $8 average. So we're going to call this up and worth it, not necessarily straight cash, because not enough sales and still books on the market in this range that to make me say truly straight cash on this one. Okay, next we have Sonic the Hedgehog Winter Jam #1, our first cover that we're going to talk about this week from Adam Bryce Thomas. This 125 was going for 50, so right at double ratio. Not a good sign when a 125 goes for 50. This usually means it's going to end up between ratio and double ratio. That's exactly what happened here. This is now a $30 to $35 book, so a trap with a $15 drop, $20 drop on a $50 book. Definitely a trap, but pretty typical for how 1 in 25s perform. Next, we have Street Fighter Masters, Kimberly #1. This was a secret retailer appreciation cover. Basically, back then, those usually are 1 per stores, which usually means they equate to about a 1 in 25. This one was going for just 20 to 40 back then, so not even double what would be a ratio on a 1 in 25. Not a great sign, but this was still going 10 to 40. A lot of variation on how much the sales are going for here, although most of the books are like the 20 to 30-ish dollar range. But enough, which is kind of where it was at before. So we'll call it steady, I'll be back. There was one recent 9.8 sale for 120, which is pretty good, but definitely a step back overall in terms of value on this book. Next, we have Star Wars, The High Republic, Shadows of Starlight #3, the Ben Harvey 1 in 25 spoiler variant. Back then, this 1 in 25 was a little bit all over the place, $35 to $100 on the range on this sucker, although most of the sales were kind of in that 50 to 70 range, so just above double ratio. Now it is a $10 to $30 book. 9.8 is only going for 45 to 80. So yeah, this is a dumpster fire. This book has dropped considerably. Basically around ratio or even slightly below on average. So yeah, this is not a book that's continuing to go for good value. Next, more covers. We have Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong, #1, the Christian Dunst Roar FX cover. So this cover where Godzilla's roaring, basically, and you can make the sound, was going for $20 to $25 out the gate. Now it's a $5 to $20 book, and with most of the sales basically at $10. So yeah, this is down in a trap. Definitely has not sustained. I thought this one might, because it was just unique enough that it might actually hold some value. I was wrong. I should have went with a more typical performance on a variant, like on just a regular variant like this. Our last cover of the week is DC's 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, #1. This is a Sawi 1 in 25, going for 40 to 50, so not quite double ratio, which is never a good sign. If it doesn't even really get to double ratio consistently, it usually ends up probably even at ratio or below instead of between ratio and double ratio. That's what's happened here. This is now a $10 to $15 book. 9.8 is only going 35 to 45, so technically they're going lower than the raw copies were at release. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. Kind of a fun Harley cover, but there's a lot of those. There's a lot of competition for a character like this to have a cover that's really going to stand out and make people continue to chase it. All right, with that, we're going to move into some Comic Buzz. We got 3 Comic Buzz books this week, which is nice. Seems like we don't get a lot of Comic Buzz books sometimes. This is Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, #1. It had been on the list a couple times already, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now it was back with the first of the 9.8s kind of hitting the market, and their sales kind of prompting it to hit the list. But at this point, it was still only like a $10 to $20 book raw. 9.8s were going for 90 to 150 though, right out of the gate. So that's where people were chasing it. At this point now, it's a $40 to $60 book raw. So that's up in straight cash on the raw side. It's doing better. 9.8 is 130 to 150. So you'll notice they're just at the top range of what they were selling initially. So they haven't really went up any, although the floors come up a little bit. This is not unusual. When 9.8s first hit the market, a lot of times they end up being, like, even though a raw copy on a new book might continue to grow in value, the 9.8s sometimes shrink just because they kind of peak out when there's very few of them. People pay more than they probably should, that they actually kind of settle there. So not an unusual trend here, but overall still up in straight cash on this book at this point, but it's going to be on the list several more times. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #194, first appearance of Black Cat, and this was kind of the buzz was this had to do with, you could have put this as like movie stuff, but really Anne Hathaway gave an interview, said that she was supposed to be Black Cat for one of the Spider-Man movies. It didn't happen. Instead, she became Catwoman and everything else. Back then, raw copies were going for 90. So there was just a lot of buzz and interest in the character. Raw copies were 90 to 250 back then. 9.8 is 2,500 to 3,000. If you've seen me talk about this book when it's hit the list before, this book has just been slowly trending up generally. It did take a little bit of a step back here after the comic boom, but for the most part, this book has continued just to slowly climb. Right now, it's a $100 to $600 book raw on recent sales, but it's really just because there was a couple really, really nice copies sell for raw. 9.8 still 25 to 32, so a couple of sales a little higher than that, $3,000, but we're going to call this steady worth it. Hasn't, obviously long term this is straight cash, but it hasn't really grown much in the last 6 months. Next, we have Batman 428, The Death of Robin, and basically this was hitting the list because of the release of the Robin Lives version. Back then, raw copies were going for 20 to 40 with 9.8, kind of a premium on a $20 to $40 book at 425 to 500. Really just has to do with the cover and how hard it is to really get a 9.8 of this book. Now it's a $10 to $40 book. 9.8 though still sitting in at 475 to 525, so they've actually creeped up a little bit. So we're gonna call this steady and worth it overall. Sitting basically the same price range. Really wasn't up a ton from where the book sat generally anyway, and it's continued to kind of creep up just ever so slightly. Next, we have Tomb of Dracula #10, the first appearance of Blade. And this was hitting the list because of the announcement of a video game, not one of the many delays we've had on the movie. But there was a video game announcement, so why this hit the list back then. Raw copies, $300 to $1,000. 8.5 is going for $1,200 to $1,700. Now, raw copies, 200 to 1,000, 8.5, 12 to 1,900. So another steady worth it, another book that's going classic book, straight cash book long term, and it's been very steady over this 6-month period. Following that news, and despite the fact that we've got negative news in terms of a movie on Blade. Next, we have Spectre number 8. This hit the list because of rumors of Aquaman. I believe at the time this was like the end of Jim Corrigan as a Spectre or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what the key is here, but anyway, there's rumors Jim Corrigan was going to be in the Aquaman 2 movie, so it's not really his first appearance, but this book was hitting the list. Not completely sure what was going on here. Raw copies were $15 to $70 back then. Now it's a $15 to $30 book. 9.8 one sale did go for $4.95, which, you know, for a 1969 book is not really that. It's pretty cheap, honestly. Overall, we'll call this down, and I'll be back based on the raw sales not coming anywhere near the peaks they were at 6 months ago. 4 books left to talk about. One more DC book, that is Justice League number 1. First appearance of Maxwell Lord, and this was hitting the list because rumors that Sean Gunn was going to be cast as Maxwell Lord, and James Gunn knew DC Universe. Obviously, Sean has got a role in the Guardians movies, and has been in a lot of his brother's movies. We've seen a version of Maxwell Lord before by Pedro Pascal in the Wonder Woman stuff, but this was causing this book to hit the list. It was a $5 to $20 book back then, 9.8, 125, which is really not a ton higher than what this book sits at, and now it's a $5 to $20 book, 75 to 125 on the 9.8. So it's steady. I'll be back on this particular book. It just kind of stayed. It's taken a slight step back on the 9.8 side, but stayed pretty much in the range that it typically is. 3 MCU rumor books that were going on back then. First up is Fantastic Four number 52. The first appearance of Black Panther. This was hitting the list because a new Black Panther animated series was supposed to be coming. Like Black Panthers Through the Ages, that kind of thing. So that was the rumor back then. Not sure, really haven't heard anything more about that. But what's causing this book to come back to the list, raw copies 150 to 600 back then, 6.0, 690 to 825. And now it's a $100 to $800 book raw on recent sales, 6.0, 625 to 850. So another what we're going to call steady and worth it on this one, and obviously a straight cash long-term book. Like I said, there were several, first Black Cat, first Blade, first Black Panther. There's been several really good books on this list, and most of them, they've held pretty steady over this 6-month period. Next, we have Wolverine Origins, number 10, first appearance of Daken. This was Deadpool 3 rumors that Daken was going to be involved in some way. Raw copies were going for $50 bucks back then, 9.8 going for $325. But yeah, this is based like everyone else that apparently every character ever is going to be in this Deadpool Wolverine movie. Hopefully that's not the case, and we get a really good movie with just a lot of cameos, but not every cameo. So we will see. Raw copies are now 20 to 50, 9.8, 3 to 350. So we're going to call this a steady, and I'll be back. Do a little better if you've been patient, but for the most part, again, this book is a book that has an established value, and it's sitting pretty much right there. And then last is Wolverine number 55. This classic Wolverine cover with Sabretooth. It's a homage to Golden Age cover. This one was hitting the list again because of Deadpool 3 stuff and speculation. Raw copies 15 to 30 back then, 9.8, 175 to 250. Now it's a $25 to $60 book, 9.8, 175 to 230. So another kind of steady, worth it book that's been going. Raw copies have crept up a little bit. 9.8s are sitting almost exactly where they were, so we'll go steady and worth it on this one as well. And again, we'll see what we really get in Deadpool 3 versus what was just rumors and what ended up on the cutting room floor. Mainly, I'm just hoping that it's a really good movie. So that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching. We had a lot of really steady books this week, way more than typical. Although we've had that several weeks now. The last few weeks, we've had a lot of steady as opposed to down or even up. We'll see if that continues as we move forward. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.